Meta, as if the L's they've been taking lately weren't bad enough, things just got a whole lot worse with their latest earnings report. But before then, for those who haven't been keeping track, from Meta freezing hiring employees because the whole Reality Labs segment of Meta hasn't been doing well, to the way that Horizon Worlds and Meta's Metaverse plans have been unappealing to employees who have to be begged into using Meta's Horizon Worlds Metaverse and falling in love with it, to Metaverse users not finding it appealing, with many of them dropping out after a month, resulting in worlds being empty and the user base actually declining rather than growing. Turmoil between executives within Meta, with folks like John Carmack speaking out against how poorly money has been spent and how the vision of this metaverse is just not quite right. Headlines about skepticism, confusion, and frustration within Meta. Questionable moves like the Quest Pro VR headset that's $1,500. It's 3 times more than the Quest 2, despite being only 50% more powerful than the Meta Quest 2. And sure, it does have, augmented reality tech and more sensors and all these things, but this product is certainly not going to accelerate VR and metaverse adoption. Poor PR as a result of just how far behind Horizon Worlds is technologically, with Mark Zuckerberg only just having announced full-body avatars with legs, something that PlayStation Home had back in 2007, resulting in people bringing up things like how embarrassingly bad the graphics of Horizon Worlds are. Mark Zuckerberg tried to do damage control by showing, a future vision of character models in Horizon Worlds, of graphics in Horizon Worlds, but what we have now for an upcoming update to avatars is this, which still looks pretty uncanny and ugly, and this is not how I'd want to interact with people on a daily basis. The short of it is that, as IGN's headline put it here, the metaverse has had a very bad week, and there's a summary of everything that's transpired over the past few months in this article for those who want to check it out. And then just yesterday, Phil Spencer spoke to the Wall Street Journal, and he put it very aptly in terms of what his thoughts are of Meta's metaverse pursuits. Today, it's a poorly built video game, he called Horizon Worlds, or just the metaverse in general. Building a metaverse that's like a living room is not how I want to spend my time. What I see in the metaverse world is that we're at the early stage and this will evolve. Now, whether it'll evolve fast enough and substantially enough that one day people will be interested in the idea of a metaverse remains to be seen. But so far, everything about the metaverse has been unappealing, and they've yet to present any use case that actually feels like it makes things more practical to do things in the metaverse than just, doing things in real life. Don't get me wrong, there are specific use cases where I can see a virtual world environment being useful, but things like working in the metaverse and hosting, video calls in the metaverse, why not just turn on the camera like this? It's way easier and faster and more efficient that way. All of this finally brings us to how Meta has been doing financially, and the headline here speaks for itself. This from CBS News. It reads right here, Meta's value has plunged by $700 billion. Wall Street calls it a train wreck. $700 billion is just such an astronomical number that I don't think it's possible to grasp the full scope of just how much money that is. For those who've never gotten close to dealing with this sum of money, it's a lot of freaking money. This is following a 24% tumbling of shares on Thursday that has resulted in Meta shares reaching the lowest levels in nearly 4 years, following an earnings report that one Wall Street analyst described as a train wreck. Now, technology company stocks in general just haven't been in a good place right now due to the current economic situation, but even by those standards, Meta stock has been plunging in a way that it outpaces the overall sector, with its shares down 67% from a year earlier compared with the tech-heavy Nasdaq's 31% slide over the same period. Meta's plunge translates into an eye-popping loss of about $700 billion in market value. As for how that translates when it comes to Meta's overall market value, we're talking about a company that was once worth over $1 trillion in September of 2021, and that value has shrunk significantly to $268 billion. And investors are getting sick and tired of Meta's spending antics and their lack of focus, and the fact that they're betting so much on something that so far hasn't shown any optimistic results. Wedbush analyst Dan Ives put it as follows: Meta's results last night was an absolute train wreck that speaks to pervasive digital advertising doldrums ahead of Zuckerberg and company as they make the risky and head-scratching bet on the metaverse. Head-scratching is a bit of an understatement, given that so far in the last 9 months, Meta has lost $9.4 billion on its metaverse unit, Reality Labs. It expects the unit to have significantly wider operating losses in 2023, the company said on Wednesday. The company company informed investors, oh, it's about to get worse, by the way. And yet, Zuckerberg still insists to investors that he's pretty confident this is going in a good direction. Really now, Mark. I don't have to be an investor to not be surprised by the fact that investors aren't convinced. The metaverse as a product and service makes no sense, and as far as the investor side of things go, the stock value shows the complete lack of confidence in Mark Zuckerberg's vision. And for users and consumers, same thing. They aren't exactly flocking to the fledgling metaverse. And right here, it is pointed out the fact that Horizon Worlds trimmed its goal for monthly active users to 280,000 from 500,000, but that space is attracting fewer than 200,000 users. So even after having cut their goal by roughly half, they still are nowhere close to meeting that goal. Less than 200,000 users versus the 280,000 or so they were expecting after they downgraded from 500,000. Another analyst advised investors the following: investors should remain on the sidelines as it'll take many years before progress in the metaverse can be truly monetized. That's if the metaverse is even a concept that has the potential to become something that users will want to use on a daily basis and a virtual world that they'll want to partake in frequently for the long term. Currently, there's nothing appealing about the metaverse other than the gimmick of, oh, cool, a virtual world. Feels like once you get over the cool tech aspect of this whole endeavor, all you're left with is indeed, as Phil Spencer put it, a really bad video game that adds nothing beneficial or practical to our daily lives. And it's not just the Metaverse division that's facing rough tidings. Facebook reported that recently they saw their active users increase by 3% from a year ago, but that's much less of an increase than previous years, far from the huge growth Facebook experienced in years prior. And then beyond that, their ad revenue across social media, which is obviously a significant part of their business, fell in the most recent quarter, with sales drooping 3.7% and adding to investor concerns. This is a result of both the sort of economic recession that we're headed in, the economic slowdown that has made advertisers cut their spending, and Apple's privacy changes to apps that run on its devices, a change that essentially allows users and consumers to ask apps not to track them, which Facebook has said will cost it $10 billion this year. With all that in mind, here's the big picture of what Meta's stock price looks like. You can see right here a big rise throughout the years up until 2021, before they rebranded to Meta and began focusing too much on this metaverse endeavor that has not panned out at all thus far. And then boom, you can see the huge plummeting, and over the past week even, you can see a big plummet from $130 to $97.94 below $100. And so the headlines are looking like this. Facebook parent Meta is having a no good, horrible day after dismal earnings report. And they further add that revenue fell 4% in the 3 months from July through September when compared with a year earlier, from $29 billion to $27.7 billion, their company said Wednesday. Even when their main sources of revenue are waning, on top of the fact that their newer endeavors like Metaverse are not panning out in any way, shape, or form, yeah, it's going to shake confidence quite a bit. IGN also covered this story and provided even more context by noting how they've lost $9.4 billion to their metaverse endeavor so far this year, and that's significantly more than the $6.9 billion in the same period last year. As for how much of that $9.4 billion they've spent this year thus far they've made back, revenue for the Reality Labs segment alone was only $285 million. That doesn't even take care of the 0.4 here in the $9.4 billion so far this year that they've lost. Here's another headline from New York Magazine. It's official. Meta is a disaster, and they echo everything that was reported through the earnings report. News outlet The Guardian also covered the story and noted how this recent dip below $100 for Meta when it comes to stock price is the lowest level since 2016. When it comes to stock price, they're performing about as well as they did 6 years ago. And then the Wall Street Journal here have their own headline: Facebook parent Meta shares fall to new multi-year lows, highlighting, like other articles, that this is the lowest we've seen Meta stock dip since 2016. The stock is now down more than 70% in 2022. Shares of Meta closed down 24.6% to $97.94 Thursday, wiping out nearly $85 billion in that period. Meta's revenue dropped 4% in the recently ended quarter, which plenty of articles have also talked about. But it's also worth noting that this is the second consecutive quarter of declining revenue. It's no secret that what investors want is to see infinite growth. And once they start sensing that things are starting to plateau and falling off, that's when you start losing them. Investors have been very frustrated. Bernstein analyst Mark Shmulik put it as follows: "We're incredibly frustrated to see expenses balloon with an almost total disregard for investor expectations. Nobody knows who the metaverse is for anymore. Employees don't like it. Customers and users don't like it. Investors don't like it. This is just sort of Mark Zuckerberg's obsession, and it's an obsession that's been dragging his company Meta through the mud these past few months, resulting in them having some of the worst financial performance in recent memory." I don't know what the future holds, but as someone who's not confident that Meta has the public's best interest in mind when developing this metaverse concept, and it's more about furthering their profits and more about monetization rather than giving us something of value, of benefit, of worth, and something that's genuinely practical and useful, I'm not going to miss the metaverse if it ends up crashing and burning. If all of this ultimately will lead to Meta completely backtracking on this endeavor, though they're so deep into it now that, they're sort of in, sunk cost fallacy mode, I feel, and whether that pays off in the long term or whether it'll just go down in flames. Again, I can't predict the future, but I wouldn't mourn the death of the metaverse. In its current state, it's looking like nothing more than a useless vanity project. Or at the very least, that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Meta's less than stellar week and past few months. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.